Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to catch all my newest uploads.
My 7-year marriage to my 33-year-old wife had always been a quiet, childless affair, reasonably harmonious despite its subtle imperfections. 2 years ago, a new demanding job brought a new, initially despised, co-worker into her life, a man she readily labelled in a hole, yet, over time, this antagonist faded from her conversations, his sharp edges mysteriously softening into an unmentioned, almost spectral presence. I, lulled by a sense of comfortable normalcy, remained blissfully oblivious, trusting in the generally amicable, if occasionally distant, dynamic of our relationship. A month ago, however, the facade began to crack, revealing a disquieting shift beneath. Her phone became her constant companion, buzzing with a flurry of secretive texts. Evenings and weekends, once shared, now vanished into a whirlwind of unexplained busyness, appointments that materialized out of thin air. The warmth of her affection evaporated, replaced by a chill and emotional distance and an increasingly tangled web of petty, almost childish, lies. The final, infuriating straw. A business trip swimsuit far too too deliberately provocative, for staid Florida conferences packed despite her unconvincing protestations that it was an unsuitable online impulse buy, quickly returned. Something was profoundly wrong. Enough was enough. For the first time in our relationship, I crossed a line I'd sworn never to breach, driven by a gnawing suspicion. I delved into the privacy of her work bag. Inside, amongst the mundane paraphernalia of her professional life, I discovered a telling tableau, a playful, almost caricature-like drawing of her, sketched on hotel stationery, lay beside a folded post-it note bearing directions to a male co-worker's house, penned in her unmistakable handwriting. A quick review of our joint bank statements painted a damning picture of clandestine dinners, romantic rendezvous masquerading as late-night work commitments. My professional instincts, honed over years as a private investigator, kicked into high gear. Privacy, once sacrosanct, be damned, this mounting suspicion demanded action. A discreet GPS tracker, legally placed in my own vehicle, became my silent, watchful witness. Her post-trip tales of leisurely coffee dates and mundane errands crumbled under the weight of the tracker's cold, hard data, which placed her nowhere near the Chipotle she claimed to have frequented, despite returning home with a telltale cup in hand. Then, a supposed company dinner and late-night work session on Tuesday further unraveled her increasingly threadbare web of deceit, the tracker revealing a different, far more intimate itinerary. And then came the ultimate betrayal, the revelation of a pregnancy, a child conceived in deceit, a child demonstrably not my own. Her furious, almost unhinged, reaction to my steadfast refusal to sign the birth certificate was the final, devastating confirmation of a trust irrevocably shattered, a marriage reduced to ashes. The GPS data painted a stark picture of her Tuesday deception, leaving work at 3:20 p.m. and remaining at that same cozy Italian restaurant, not the office, until p.m. But the real hammer blow landed the following Saturday. We had plans to watch my niece's 8 o'clock a.m. tennis match. She insisted on driving separately, claiming a post-match work session at a coffee shop. After the game, she detailed her plans, mentioning a specific, trendy coffee shop, even elaborating on why she'd chosen that particular location. I feigned normalcy, wished her a good day, and headed to my own car. My phone, displaying the live GPS feed, told a very different story. Instead of the bustling coffee shop, her car drove directly to a nondescript Comfort Inn motel. I followed, parking discreetly in a nearby lot, waiting until I was certain she was inside the motel, not simply parked in the lot. The waiting was agonizing, each tick of the clock amplifying the betrayal. From the motel lobby, I called her, feigning casual curiosity, asking how the coffee shop was. Her voice, strained and hesitant, replied that it was good, then quickly countered with a suspicious, "Why?" I simply asked her to come down to the lobby so we could talk. As she descended, her face pale and drawn, the predictable, preemptive excuse tumbled out. "It's not what you think. He has to do this because he's been caught with other girls before." Caught? With other girls? The implication hung heavy in the air. Pressed for an explanation, she claimed they were merely working, that nothing physical ever happened. That's when I snapped, telling her to get out of my car. I drove away, leaving her standing there, the lie hanging between us. The barrage of calls that followed, 50 in all, was relentless. Finally, I answered, laying down a single, unwavering condition. One more lie, and I was hanging up. She confessed to a single kiss, 5 months prior, dismissing it as a meaningless mistake. They were, she insisted, just working. My next question, delivered with icy calm, cut through her carefully constructed narrative. "How many times have you met him in hotels?" Her answer, choked and reluctant, confirmed my worst fears. About 10 times in the last 9 months, when I pressed about the Tuesday work dinner, her demeanor shifted again, becoming defensive, evasive. I told her, plainly and unequivocally, that I believed she was lying, and hung up. The charade was over. As I loaded my belongings and my dog into my car, preparing to leave our shared home, she appeared, blocking the driveway with her own vehicle, refusing to budge until we talked. The tears flowed freely now, accompanied by a chorus of apologies, a desperate plea for understanding. I drove away that day, leaving behind the wreckage of our marriage. It's been a month since then. We've met a few times, ostensibly for her to explain, to offer some semblance of justification for her actions, but each attempt at honest conversation ends the same way. My questions met with defensiveness, accusations of trapping her, and a stubborn refusal to answer, claiming that honesty isn't good for us. Even now, the lies continue, small, insidious untruths that serve only to deepen the chasm between us. She's firm that it wasn't a romantic thing. She claimed they were just good friends and he was helping with her job. Their talks got inappropriate, discussing our problems. She confessed to texting him and deleting the texts, saying they weren't romantic but could be seen as flirting. She said he helped with her depression and work. Maybe because I love her or I'm scared of the truth. I'm stuck trying to find the truth, but even if I find it, I don't see how I can get past what I already know. Am I losing it? Update: we're a month post-day. I conversed with her last night. Here's the scoop. I inquired about her chats with the man in the past for weeks. She mentioned he's clueless about my confrontation at the D-Day hotel. She hasn't discussed it with him, deeming it a marital issue unrelated to him. I asked about cutting off non-work talks with him. She claims she's scaling back. That phrase set me off. She believes she must taper instead of going no contact because he's unaware of me catching her. She then fibbed about a trivial detail. I called her out, utterly sure she was lying. She vehemently denied it. Never yielding, I let it go, adding it to the heap of unresolved problems. After she claimed to be tapering off social talk with the other man, I stashed a voice recorder in my house and split. Last night I checked the tape and found my wife and this man gagged for well over an hour and at least 2 calls. The recording stopped in the afternoon, so I assumed they spoke more in the evening. I didn't catch many specifics, but I heard a few incriminating remarks. They discussed our marriage, his status, something she claimed he knew nothing about. They chatted about using a secret phone app to avoid detection. She insulted me for arriving late for breakfast. They talked and chuckled about numerous topics. I haven't heard my wife that elated since we dated. I confronted her. She admitted to some, denied the rest. I'm beyond caring. I'm meeting a divorce lawyer. This morning, over the past fortnight, I've maintained no communication with my spouse. Recently, she reached out via text seeking a conversation. I responded, stating my condition for discussion. She'd have to come clean about everything before I'd engage her. She alleged awareness of a wiretap on her phone, which didn't exist, but I let her believe it and claimed I already knew all. I insisted on hearing the truth directly from her. Eventually, she relented, agreeing to sit down to divulge everything. When she visited, she confessed that her involvement with another man was indeed intimate. Spanning the last 6 months, she admitted to booking a hotel room the day prior to our anniversary for their rendezvous. She also confirmed ongoing communication with him post-discovery, claiming he assisted her in managing my inquiries. She asserted that the affair had ended for good and expressed a desire to mend our marriage. This confession unfolded 6 painful weeks after I caught her in the hotel. I suspect her confession only emerged due to my persistence, although she contends she always intended to come clean, aiming to minimize the hurt for both of us. The damage accrued during those 6 weeks appears insurmountable. Update: we ended up divorcing. I took my time before making that decision, and in hindsight, I wish I hadn't waited as long. My ex-wife wanted to stay together, although her reasons were unclear to me. However, her continuous lies and gaslighting made reconciliation impossible. Going through the divorce has been the most challenging experience of my life. During my marriage, I was fully committed. I wasn't perfect, but I loved my wife wholeheartedly, envisioned a lifetime together. I was willing to do anything to make her happy, and I believe I made significant efforts on multiple occasions. Now that I've distanced myself from that relationship, I can see it for what it truly was, a narcissistic person draining the energy and goodness out of someone who cared. The marriage felt completely one-sided, with one person giving everything and the other taking even more than could be given. Towards the end, I started believing I was a worthless partner. She undermined my profession, my personality and my appearance. However, since the divorce, my business has thrived and I've been able to date women I once thought were out of my league. I used to think I was unattractive, partly due to my ex-wife's influence, but now I've had gorgeous, much younger women approach me in bars. I've had a few wonderful relationships with amazing women. These relationships ended amicably due to compatibility issues, but they helped me see how terrible of a partner my ex-wife truly was. I have no contact with my ex anymore and I rarely think about her. The divorce became contentious because she thought I was receiving too much of the money, even though I accepted less than 50% to ensure a smoother process without disrupting businesses and retirements. It's astounding that she could cheat on someone and then complain about the amount of money they're taking, even if it's less than half. This reinforced my belief that I made the right decision and needed to distance myself from this toxic situation as quickly as possible. I lost some friends during the divorce, but I'm not bothered by it. Most of them took my side and I have no concern for those who didn't. They made it easy for me to let them go. The hardest part was losing my in-laws, as I genuinely cared about some of them. However, I understand their stance. I sent enough correspondence to my ex-wife's affair partner's wife to make it clear what had happened, and while she never responded, I respect her decision. For anyone going through this nightmare, here's some advice. Separate yourself from the situation to think clearly without being manipulated. Seek professional help. Surround yourself with friends and family. Make healthy choices. Stay active. Limit substance use and prioritize self-care. Listen to advice, but ultimately make your own decisions because it's your life. There were incredibly dark days after discovering the affair, but after the initial heartache, this period has been the best time of my life. I find genuine happiness every day. If you're facing a similar situation and need advice from someone who's been through it, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. Alright, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive into story 2. Around a month ago, I discovered that both of my children were the results of affairs. My soon-to-be ex-wife had been harboring suspicions for a while that neither of them was biologically mine. 6 years ago, when my son was born, I experienced immense happiness. I had married my best friend, we had a child together and everything seemed perfect. However, as he grew older, I started to have doubts about his parentage. He didn't resemble me, and the more he grew, the more apparent it became that he looked vastly different from what I would expect my child to look like. I didn't want to let mere appearances drive my suspicions, as I'm not a petty or paranoid person. It was my wife's behavior that raised alarm bells whenever she went out. Her whereabouts didn't match her claims. She had unexplained gaps in her schedule, refused to let me interact with anyone from her workplace, and a close friend of hers accused her of flirting with their significant other at the time. The lies she spun started catching up with her, especially after our son's birth, yet despite her deceitful nature, I still loved her. Foolish as it may sound, whenever one of her lies was exposed, she would assure me of her love for me. She had managed to convince me that despite her dishonesty and manipulation, she wasn't an unfaithful woman. Last year, she became pregnant again, and I clung to a glimmer of hope that the child might be mine. However, when our daughter was born, it was evident that she was multi-ethnic. I declined to sign the birth certificate, and the subsequent paternity test I requested confirmed my suspicions all along. Neither of them shared my biological connection. The day I received those test results was the day I initiated divorce proceedings against my unfaithful spouse and walked away from the family I had built. I understood that my departure would shatter her son's life as he witnessed me leaving. Despite my apprehensions, I had been the best father I could be to him, pouring all my love and effort into being the dad he deserved. However, now when I see him, I am overcome with repulsion. I am repulsed by my unfaithful wife, repulsed by my own lack of trust in my instincts, and repulsed that the last 6 years of my life have amounted to nothing. Multiple individuals have labeled me a monster for leaving my son in this manner. Since I moved out, my ex has repeatedly attempted to manipulate me into reconciling by using him as a bargaining chip. She has him call me at odd hours of the night, crying and pleading for his daddy to return. On the day I packed my belongings to move out, she paraded him into the room to demonstrate the damage I was causing, both online and offline. Every time he is mentioned, I am criticized and condemned despite the fact that I am not biologically related to the boy. I am his father. Regrettably, I have now come to realize that for most people, my own feelings hold no significance. My parents are my sole supporters throughout this ordeal, while my own siblings brand me a reprehensible person for leaving a child in such a manner. My sense of betrayal and sorrow is disregarded because a child is involved. I understand it's not his fault. I know that the man he called his father for his entire life just walked away. But why am I expected to man up? Why should I pretend everything is fine and suppress my contempt for this entire situation? Why should I set aside my own life and emotions? I never truly was the boy's father, even though I loved him as one and still do. However, I would come to resent and despise him if I were forced to continue playing that role. I would loathe myself for not standing up and reclaiming my own life. He is not my child, and although it's not his fault, he is no longer my responsibility. I suppose sharing my personal issues achieved some. I've noticed a few common questions, so I'll address them here. 1. Her son is aware of the truth behind my departure. I had a conversation with him explaining that I am not his biological father, and that his mother deceived me and was unfaithful. I made it clear that I harbor no ill feelings towards him, that he bears no responsibility for this situation, and that I will continue to think highly of him. 2. Some have suggested that I never truly cared for him, or that I was always searching for a way out. It's challenging to convey emotions in a text post like this, especially when overshadowed by strong animosity towards you. You're free to form your own opinions. 3. I have legal representation and I won't be obligated to pay child support or alimony. Finally, for those suggesting that I should remain in her son's life and continue as his father, that's not realistically feasible. I don't hold any animosity towards him, but I've been deceived, lied to, and exploited by a selfish and deceitful individual who has now entangled her children in her web of lies. He is an innocent victim of her actions and bears no blame. However, it doesn't change the harsh reality we're confronted with. I don't hate him. I feel profound sadness when I think about his situation. Nevertheless, when I look at him, all I see is 6 years of deception, 6 years of being taken advantage of, and 6 long years of accumulated doubts and frustrations with a woman who used me. I can't simply set aside my resentment to try to be a part of his life, because the life I lived with him was nothing more than a facade crafted by his mother. This is the harsh reality I must grapple with, and I cannot in good conscience subject myself or him to any more of it. I've noticed numerous armchair lawyers in the comments suggesting that this post is fake due to the reasons I mentioned earlier. I won't disclose my current state of residence, but I am currently in the process of legally challenging paternity, known as the disestablishment of paternity. This won't silence the 90% of you who think Google makes you legal experts, but at least I've made an effort to edit. This will be my final edit before I move on from this little distraction I created for myself. Firstly, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their kind words, whether in the comments, DMs, or chat. You've brightened my day, which hasn't happened in a while. I wish I could respond to each of you, but I can't thank you enough. Secondly, I've noticed many people vehemently criticizing the words I used to describe my soon-to-be ex. I want to clarify that I'm currently in one of the darkest periods of my life. All I feel is intense anger towards the woman who has devastated my life. Is the language I used inappropriate? Is the word I chose to describe her degrading and offensive? Yes, I'll admit that, but I won't apologize for it. What I've written here today reflects the harsh reality I'm facing right now. It's an unfiltered outpouring of emotion. I don't aim to make people hate women or convey a misogynistic message about women being terrible. That's not my goal here, and it's not the message of this post. I understand why people take issue with the word I used, and I accept that as valid criticism of my actions today. I came here today to find an outlet for the situation I'm in, to vent, grieve, and cope with the complex and intense emotions that have consumed me for the past month. A place where I can speak my mind freely, and you know what? I achieved that today. It was surprisingly good. Thanks to all of you. Alright, here is a third story. We were previously together when we were both 22, right after college. Initially, I was more of a friend to her until I asked her out when we both ended up working in the same city. We dated for 9 months, and during that time, I believed, however, she suddenly became distant without any apparent reason. She never wanted anything serious back then, with thoughts of pursuing her master's degree in the USA. On the other hand, I wanted a serious relationship, but she viewed it as neediness and felt I should be grateful for the opportunity. She was quite popular in college and very attractive, which made me feel insecure because at the time I was working on building my own confidence and believed I was becoming a desirable partner. We stayed in touch due to mutual friends. From what I observed between the ages of 23 and 27, she dated various men. When she was 27 to 28, I heard that her parents attempted to set up an arranged marriage for her, but none of those prospects worked out. Eventually, she reached out to me and one thing led to another, and we started dating. At the beginning, she asked me if I was seeking a serious relationship, and I told her I had never dated without serious intentions. However, I also mentioned that I wasn't in a hurry to get married and suggested that if she felt pressured by her parents or any other reason to get married quickly, she should explore other options. We dated for 6 months, which were honestly some of the best months of my life. Our bed life was fantastic and she was incredibly accommodating and sweet. She brought up the topic of marriage, but I expressed that I wasn't ready. Many of our friends had gone through divorces, which made me cautious. I wanted to be sure before taking such a big step. She accused me of lying about my intentions, but I showed her messages where I agreed to a serious relationship, just not one that was rushed. She argued that overall, we had been dating for over a year and that she was eager to settle down. After this conversation, things became distant between us. Despite sending her sweet goodnight texts, she sometimes didn't even respond, and she showed little. A month passed and then she told me that I should either marry her or move on, claiming that she could easily find another guy and that I was fortunate to have her. This situation has been painful for me, reminiscent of past experiences. I consider myself a modest person, but I also believe I've become an attractive catch. Despite my fondness for her, I made it clear that I wouldn't be pressured into marriage. So we decided to end our relationship. After another month, she started texting me again and we rekindled our relationship. It's been 3 months now and she has returned to being her sweet self. She admitted that she was wrong to claim she could easily find someone else and said that I'm the right one for her. She expressed a desire for marriage as soon as I'm ready and emphasized that her parents are urging her to get married, but she's willing to give me time. However, I feel overwhelmed by the idea of marriage at the moment and concerned about her ability to switch between being sweet and distant so abruptly. Is she being sweet just to persuade me to marry her? While I like her, I have a nagging feeling that this may not work well in the long run, and it seems like marriage is becoming more forced than natural. Update: the day after I posted my initial message, the thoughtful comments from people made me realize that I needed to end the relationship, a realization I probably should have reached without posting. Last Saturday was quite chaotic, and I'm really grateful for the advice I received. I decided to break up with her and now I feel like it was the obvious choice. I called her in the morning and explained that I couldn't handle the abrupt shifts between being cold and distant. I also told her that she should find someone who aligns with her timeline, and I didn't want to be pressured into marriage. I expressed that it hurt me when she believed she was better than me and out of my league. I want someone who treats me as an equal. I mentioned that I wanted to end things on good terms and wished her well. Her response was anger. She accused me of never loving her and targeted some of my insecurities, which I prefer not to share, even anonymously. The conversation became heated, and although I tried to calm her down and end things amicably, she was insistent that I had wasted her time and wasn't a real man, leading to a bitter ending. Then, she sends me a text expressing her desire to end things on better terms. She suggests that she'll come over so we can have a productive conversation about our relationship. When I see her in person, she looks more attractive than ever. We decide to have an open exchange of criticism. I acknowledge her criticism about prioritizing work too much. I also share with her how her comment about being able to find someone better hurt me, emphasizing that such thoughts shouldn't be present in any relationship. She admits her mistake and proceeds to shower me with numerous compliments, saying that I'm the best guy she's ever dated. She asks if there's anything she can do to fix things, and I respond that this relationship is beyond repair, but I'm glad we didn't leave things on a sour note. I make it clear that nothing will change my decision to end it. Surprisingly, she then tries to initiate an intimate encounter, something she had always rejected before considering it disgusting. I find it even more enjoyable than our previous lovemaking. Afterward, she suggests I take until the next day to decide if it's truly over, and assures me she'll do whatever it takes to make amends. I firmly state that it's over, and I can't continue in a relationship where I have to threaten to end it to receive respect, love, and compromise. She starts crying and tells me that I've always been the one for her, the one she'd end up with. She reveals that some of her friends had shown interest in me over the years, but she kept it a secret because she wanted me in the end. Despite her persistent pleas for over an hour, I stand my ground and eventually she accepts the reality and leaves. Later, I receive a screenshot from a friend of an Instagram story she posted for her close friends. I was part of that list earlier this week, but clearly not anymore. It's a special list in green where you only share content with a select group of followers. The story essentially criticizes me for wasting our time, among other things. I decide to send her a final message before blocking her. I express my hope that everything goes well in her life and that we can go our separate ways. I feel liberated and look forward to finding a woman who treats me with kindness and loves me for who I am. All right, here is a fourth story. It all began as a typical Wednesday. I wrapped up my work and headed over to my girlfriend's place to hang out after dinner. We've been in a relationship for about a year and a half. When I arrived at her house, she explained that she had plans to meet up with her best friend and that they wanted to go to another girl's house, someone they've only met a few times, to have some drinks. I wasn't thrilled about going to this other girl's house and suggested that we just spend some time at our best friend's place and then head back home, since I had work in the morning. Besides, I find it more enjoyable to hang out with her best friend's boyfriend while they do their thing. So we went to her best friend's place, where I was supposed to pick her up to go to the other girl's house. However, when we got there, she suggested that we stay at her best friend's place as I had originally proposed. I thought that was perfect and we hung out there for about an hour. I had a beer with her boyfriend because he offered it to me and I accepted to be polite. Generally, I try not to drink or do anything during the week, and if it were up to me, I'd be in bed by PM. Weekends are a different story when I'm not working. Anyways, the girls started taking vodka shots and were getting quite drunk. At this point, her friend mentioned wanting to leave and go somewhere else. I suggested that it was getting late and I wanted to head home soon, so we should stay put. She didn't argue, but this idea got stuck in my girlfriend's mind and now she was determined to go somewhere else. She called the girl whose house we were supposed to visit and told her we'd be coming over for a while. Initially I said, no, we shouldn't go there, and I needed to get to bed. It was my girlfriend insistent on attending a late night gathering at a friend's apartment. Finally wore down my resistance. I reluctantly agreed, setting a firm midnight departure as my only condition. The apartment, predictably, was exactly as I'd envisioned, a chaotic, cluttered space filled with unfamiliar faces I had no desire to meet, nowhere to sit, a palpable air of stale cigarette smoke, and a general atmosphere of what I can only describe as shabby neglect. It was nearing 11:30 PM. I could tough it out for another half hour. My girlfriend and her friend, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort, settled in, socializing with the other guests and steadily emptying a bottle of vodka. The room grew progressively louder, the conversations more slurred, the laughter more raucous. Midnight arrived, and I, true to my word, announced our departure. My girlfriend, however, was having none of it. She brushed off my attempts to leave, lost in the intoxicating haze of cheap vodka and boisterous camaraderie, like a child refusing to leave a playground. My repeated reminders, every few minutes, were met with the same indifferent dismissal. Here I was, stuck playing chaperone to two increasingly intoxicated young women, desperately trying to extract them from this chaotic scene so I could finally go home. Then, things took a decidedly bizarre turn. I'm still not entirely clear on the sequence of events, but suddenly, my girlfriend, her friend, and two other girls vanished into a bedroom, closing the door behind them. Snippets of conversation drifted out, including the unsettling mention of a foursome. I stood in the living room, surrounded by a group of equally bewildered guys, all exchanging confused glances. What exactly was happening behind that closed door? Barging in to retrieve my girlfriend felt inappropriate, not to mention potentially awkward, given I was in a stranger's apartment and had no idea what I might encounter. I texted her, but received no reply. Minutes ticked by, punctuated by muffled giggles and hushed whispers from the bedroom. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just drunken silliness. Then one of the girls emerged from the room. Seizing the opportunity, I approached the door and slipped inside. There, in the midst of the dimly lit chaos, I found my girlfriend, pulling her away and expressing my profound discomfort with the situation. My sudden appearance startled the other two girls, effectively putting an end to whatever foursome had been contemplated. I reiterated firmly that we were leaving. She agreed, asking me to leave the room so she and her friend could get dressed. I waited and waited. After several minutes, growing increasingly impatient, I cautiously opened the door. The scene that greeted me was unexpected. There she was, under the covers of an undeniably unkempt bed, receiving oral sex from her best friend. The air hung thick with betrayal and disbelief. I walked back into the bedroom. The words, "That's gross, what are you doing?" escaping my lips before I could stop them. The abrupt silence that followed was thick with awkwardness. They stopped immediately, and I stood there, trembling slightly, a mixture of shock and disgust coursing through me. I mumbled something about leaving, grabbed my shoes, and retreated to the living room, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to just walk out and leave them to it, but the responsible, albeit increasingly exasperated, part of me knew I couldn't just abandon two drunk girls in a strange apartment. Sighing, I went back to the bedroom, telling them to gather their things so we could finally escape this surreal nightmare. Her friend, seemingly aware of the gravity of the situation, mumbled an apology. I, still reeling, remained largely silent, driving them home in a thick fog of disbelief. I dropped her friend off first, the awkward silence punctuated only by the occasional sniffle from the back seat. Back at our apartment, I attempted to talk to my girlfriend, but her heavy intoxication rendered the conversation almost meaningless. She seemed vaguely aware that she'd done something wrong, initially attempting to justify her actions with the tired excuse of me not giving her enough attention, specifically not engaging in a particular sexual activity she enjoyed. We argued, briefly and pointlessly, and I think I managed to convey my displeasure before we finally collapsed into bed. The next day, sober and contrite, she offered a more coherent explanation. Apparently, they'd both thought I'd be okay with it because it was just girls. She also claimed her friend had initiated it, and she'd gone along with it, finding the whole experience very strange. I explained, as calmly as I could, that I felt deeply hurt and betrayed, that regardless of the gender involved, it felt like cheating. While I admitted I might be even more upset if it had been with a guy, it still felt deeply disrespectful and wrong. Now, guilt gnaws at her demeanor noticeably different, withdrawn, almost fragile. The awkwardness hangs heavy between us, a palpable tension in every interaction. I'm left grappling with the uncertainty of how to move forward. I know, logically, that it qualifies as cheating, regardless of gender. I also know that had I not walked in on that scene, I would have remained blissfully ignorant. I've told her I understand her skewed rationale, her misguided belief that it was acceptable because it was with a woman, but I've also made it unequivocally clear that any repetition of this behavior would be the end of our relationship. So, here I am, wrestling with this uncomfortable question: am I being too forgiving? Is my willingness to move past this a sign of weakness, or is it a testament to the strength of our relationship? I honestly don't know. I'm navigating uncharted territory, hoping I'm making the right decision, but plagued by the nagging fear that I'm setting myself up for future heartbreak.